mostly black. Very few white people. They know us poor folk are getting together, and they're afraid some of the poor white folk are going to wake up and get together, so they want to scare them out and say, mostly black.
My dad's parents were like, they were millionaires before the crash, right? The Depression, and they were racist. My dad was German, and so they were racist. So when they met us the first time, that was the first and last time they met us. So we didn't know why, because of course your parents aren't going to share that pain with you. We just thought Grandma and Grandpa Wagner just, we just don't see them. But we see my uncle, my dad's brother, and we see my dad's sister and her husband. But grandparents, we never talked about. I would say I didn't realize I was black until People's Temple, but my first racial experience was in Santa Rosa. I was in junior high, and this white girl was behind me in line, and she called me the N-word. I had never heard it, but the way it rolled off her tongue, I knew it was vile. So I slapped her. And my mother came to school, and then she said, this is what this means. I had never heard that word. And so me realizing I was black was in People's Temple when it was actually pointed out. So when we went to People's Temple, Jim was talking about white people. And so, and he'd point white people out. So it's like, these are white people, because color was never discussed in my household. My mother never said your dad is white, I'm, African American. It wasn't a discussion ever. And so I didn't know he was white, but the way Jim talked about, white people, they were the oppressor.
Blacks, the most precious, forgiving, sensitive, more warmth, more laughter, more kindness in them, and the poorest jobs, our wage scale's half the white man's wage scale. The housing, we've got 1/4 the housing in every big city that the white man has. The nicest people on earth are black and brown, and they got the dirtiest shaft.
So now I'm looking at my dad thinking, is he the oppressor? I never saw my dad being the oppressor. I never saw him as an oppressor, but actually a warrior. For him marrying an African American woman in the early 60s was still not popular even in San Francisco. He defied his boss, because his boss said, if you marry this colored woman, probably said colored woman, you're going to be fired. And my dad, told me years later, he said, fire me. My mother never went on a convention with my dad. He went once a year. He'd always bring my sister and I look-alike dresses, but different colors, right? And he had company picnics. I don't ever remember us being invited. Now, as I got older, I remember things. And then my dad was a member of the Marin County Country Club. So I remember the first time we went, and then people were getting out of the pool. It's like, oh my gosh, we got the pool to ourselves. We're like, yay, we're kids. We came at the perfect time. Not understanding the reason they were getting out of the pool, because we were black. And this is California. California is supposed to be very liberal, right? And it wasn't. That mentality still existed. But those are things that my parents never shared with us as children. You see how I didn't ever know color existed? It was never brought to our attention. Jim Jones would tout that he was Native American, right? And so that way, it wouldn't look as if he was white, with the majority of African American, members. So he didn't say he was Caucasian or white. He said he was Native American. That way, being Native American, he could understand the struggle. And so basically, white people you didn't want to be white in People's Temple. And I think those white people in People's Temple felt probably guilt. I think that's what he tried to give them. And so they actually, I think, had more to prove. They had to become more involved in People's Temple and sacrifice more to prove that they weren't racist, even though there were racists inside People's Temple. They could, they're trying to help the black struggle. Well, the interesting thing about People's Temple was that when Jim moved to Ukiah, right, Redwood Valley, that was basically all white. And so I think what happened was Jim really realized that resources were running out. And someone said, go to San Francisco because there's a need. There's a whole community in the Fillmore that is African American. And not just are they African American, but they're religious. And then I think Jim thought that African American folks are just loyal, regardless. And so he went into our community, right? And that's where he started pulling folks in. And that's where the healings and his whole game to garner Black African American people were the healings.